Are you too busy? Too stressed out? Unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hello and welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. Today's episode is about whole body health. My guest is the awesome Amy Love, nutrition therapy practitioner and co-founder of Real Food Whole Health. And she's going to tell us about the concept of essential elements and why they're needed to balance whole health. Amy Love, welcome.
Thank you so much, Diane. I'm so happy to be here with you.
And I'm happy that you're here. Can you tell us about your journey to whole health yourself? I read where you have a fascinating journey.
Yeah, it was actually quite a roller coaster ride, to be honest with you. Kind of as far as I can look back, I had health issues. I mean, even going back to infancy. And I just kind of remember always being sick. And even from, a very young age to I'm going to say till almost 12, I was on antibiotics and steroids almost constantly for sinus infections and colds. And then I would have a reaction to one medicine and they would switch to another one. And I was a child of the 80s. So that's just what everybody did. And from 11 to 13, I had migraines every day for 2 years. I couldn't be in a car for more than about 5 minutes without getting terribly car sick. Couldn't be under fluorescent lights. So school was really difficult. It was really just crazy. And, we went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and I was hospitalized for a time. They tried almost like chemotherapy type drugs to get rid of the migraines.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, of course that didn't work. It made it worse. And I just remember like getting out of the hospital and laying in my bed and watching the ceiling fan go round and around and around. And I was in bed for like 2 weeks after I got home. And, I would get up occasionally and eat some saltines or drink a Coke, which now I just cringe, but that's what I could handle. And then really, I just kept like fighting through all these symptoms over and over. And there were like little glimmers of hope, like at 14, I was introduced to herbal medicine by a friend's mom who brought over a bottle of feverfew, an herb. And it's great for migraines. And it doesn't help everybody, but it did help me. And I thought, whoa, this is different. I didn't know anything about herbal medicine, natural medicine, alternative medicine, nothing. And so that really kind of started me on looking at least for answers for myself, looking outside of doctors and hospitals, and just trying to figure out like what that was all about. And so I always joke that I was the 17-year-old reading, Prevention magazine instead of 17, because, I was telling my parents to eat blueberries. And, it's funny, they called me like 10 years later and they're like, oh, you should eat blueberries. It's great for your memory. And, but really, even as I moved into young adulthood, I was on a path to become a pediatrician. I actually decided, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go into the medical field. I want to be in healthcare, but I don't want to be, a pediatrician because I didn't want to deal with insurance and deal with, all that stuff. So I decided to start my journey as a massage therapist. And that brought me into all sorts of like energy work and just other healing modalities, aromatherapy, reflexology, on and on and on. And that was like really opening my eyes. Like I definitely saw healing and everything through that and was able to kind of battle my way back to health. But yeah, it was a long road. And in fact, for me, like real food was sort of my last piece of the puzzle. Like I kind of got, my thoughts and emotions and all that stuff like fixed first, which for so many people is like kind of a last piece. For me, the food was like so huge. And so going gluten-free, really going to a real food diet, cleaning up my sources, organic, grass-fed, all of these things, making homemade broth at home, all of those things really helped catapult me to a new level. And that's when I really decided, okay, I've got to help other people with this. And so I went back to school, became a nutritional therapist, and yeah, it's kind of unfolded from there.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, you say everything in the body is connected, and it is only when all the essential elements are addressed that whole health can be realized. First, can you tell us what are essential elements and then how do they help us?
Absolutely. So, the essential elements of whole health is something that my husband and I really kind of created to take a holistic lifestyle change and break it down into doable, actionable steps that weren't overwhelming. As clients would come to me and, they'd have these, mile long lists of symptoms and all these things. And we talk about their life, we talk about their diet, their stress levels, everything else. They would say, what do I need to fix? And I kind of wanted to say, well, we've got to change your whole life. And that is really overwhelming. Like, you don't want to say that to somebody. It's not sustainable. It's not doable, overnight to change your whole life. So we really came up with the concept of the essential elements, which are number one, a real food diet. Number two, the physical body. Number three, non-toxic lifestyle. Number four, movement and nature. Number five, thoughts and emotions. And number six is connections. And I'll talk a little bit about more about what each one of those are, but it really is looking at the entire picture of health and breaking it down into these little components so you can go in and say focus on real food diet, get that house in order and then move on to something else and get that in order. And it's really doable. And we have just found that, working with hundreds of clients, like it really takes all of these being in balance. It doesn't mean they all have to be perfect. Of course, we're not aiming for perfection, but it really is that, if people have almost all of these in line, one thing can be out of whack. One element can be out of whack, say the diet, and it will affect all the rest of it. It'll affect all your health. So it's really about looking at it in the holistic sense, the whole sense, to recover your health.
So are these essential elements, do you have to teach your new people the concept before you can help them?
I do a little bit. We have an online class that helps with this as well. And then of course I've written several, big long blog post series that kind of go over it. So there's a little bit of a primer for them.
Okay.
But I think it's really like easy to understand. Like when you first see it, it's like, oh my goodness, there's 6 elements and what does it all mean? But it really kind of is intuitive and makes a lot of sense. So, real food diet, obviously we're talking about the foods that we eat. We want it to be nutrient dense. We want it to be properly prepared. So if we are having grains, they're soaked or sprouted, the same with seeds and nuts. Traditional foods that have nourished generations. This isn't some confusing newfangled diet. It's real foods, whole foods.
When you say real food, whole foods,
Uh-huh.
Can you give an example? Because believe it or not, everybody doesn't know what that concept really means.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I hear you. So we want to eat food in as close to its natural state as possible. In the concept of an omnivorous diet, it's, grass-fed meats, pastured poultry, wild-caught fish, organic fruits and vegetables. If you're going to do seeds, nuts, grains, some people tolerate these, some people don't. Some people need to take them out for a short time of healing. But, those should really be soaked and sprouted. That was a really new concept for me. It just really helps make them more digestible. It's not the end of the world, if some of those, unsoaked nuts and seeds get in or whatever. But that's really like what we're aiming for.
Okay.
We're aiming for eggs that are, organic from pasture raised chickens. We're really trying to go back to, if you would go back 100 years and look at the quality of food, that's really what we're looking at. It's what people used to call food. So without all the labels and all the stuff that's been done to it, it could get sort of confusing, right? With all the pasture raised and cage free. And
it's very confusing.
Yeah.
I think it's more confusing than ever. And then we have commercials that do job on us with the
Mm-hmm.
confusion. So it's good that you actually walk people through the real food diet because foods become very complicated.
Yes, it has. And we really advocate for, healthy fats. And I mean, so many people, like you say, healthy fats, and they look like a deer in the headlights. They say, well, first of all, I didn't know fat was healthy, because it's been demonized for so long. And then maybe, okay, a little bit was healthy. So maybe just salmon and avocados. And, like there's a whole range that we have to look at. And, actually, when we talk about butter and we talk about lard and we talk, people's eyes get really big and they say, are you sure it's healthy? And it's like, well, yes, if we look at saturated fats from, grass-fed animals, we look at very clean sources, we look at coconut oil, we look at, these are all options for people to pull from. It's not that every single person's going to eat all of these foods. It's options to pull from for your diet. And we also look at people's, their body and their health status right now. Are they recovering from, a chronic long-term illness? Do they need more, bone broths and very digestible braised foods and things like that? Do they need, lighter, fresher, more fruits and vegetables? Like, do they need to go grain-free for a time? So it's really looking at, okay, we're doing whole foods. It's appropriate for your body and your health status right now. And that's going to be fluid. But as long as we have that baseline of what real foods are, we can choose from that menu over time. And then we move into physical body. And when we say the physical body, we're talking organs, we're talking systems, and we're talking structure. So basically, this is achieving proper digestion, making sure you have a healthy gut, addressing blood sugar handling. And that's not just necessarily like pricking your finger and checking the blood sugar. It's really how the organs are handling your blood sugar. How's your liver and your pancreas and your adrenals? How are they handling your blood sugar? Fatty acid, mineral balance, optimal hydration, getting enough sleep. And then your structural alignment. Maybe a chiropractor needs to be part of your health team. So that's sort of all under the umbrella of physical body. And that's something that, like, as we work with people, we, on an intake, we go through a questionnaire with them. We look at any lab work that they've had done. We actually have a very long questionnaire, and then we go over symptoms and see, like, what's really going on in their whole picture.
Okay.
And I think that that's something that so many people, when you go to the doctor, you get 15 minutes, right? For the whole appointment. And so they don't get to really talk about everything that's going on. And there's not really a lot of like figuring out of the pattern, because a lot of things can be connected that maybe you wouldn't think of. Maybe you're having a certain pain or, dry skin or this and that. And it's like, if we can start putting the whole picture together, maybe there's 300 or 400 reasons that you could have dry skin. But when I see it with this symptom and this symptom and this, it's like, okay, now we're looking at maybe there's a gallbladder issue and you're not emulsifying your fats properly. And that's why, you're getting it in the diet, but you're not assimilating it.
This is so great because as you just said, when you go to the doctor today, you get seen for a specific ailment or issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go to another doctor to see something else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
It's great that you look at the whole body, and this is a perfect augmentation to having a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely part of what we call the health support team. I don't think there's any one practitioner that can sort of take all the roles for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not a physician. I don't claim to be. I don't want to be. This is there's too much going on there. So it's really about building your healthcare support team. And like I said, bringing on a chiropractor, bringing on, a movement therapist or, a trainer or whatever these different things that you need. It's really crafting it to you,
I tell you, the older I get, the more I add to my team.
Yes. Keep everything running appropriately.
Right.
It's true. It's true. And really, I mean, when we talk about our next element is the non-toxic lifestyle. And of course, like the first thing you think of is personal care products, household products, appropriate detoxification, addressing EMFs or electromagnetic radiation exposure with all these cell devices we have and all that. But a big part of that too is making conscious healthcare decisions. So having that team that that you can rely on, that that you can go to and talk to, that if you have that primary care physician, if you want to consider an herbal medicine or a homeopathy or essential oils or something, or diet change, anything, that they're going to be open to that they have your best interest in mind. And it's not just that, person that won't even consider it, that doesn't listen to your needs. It's about finding the people that work for you and really, advocating for yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes that takes a little work.
It does.
But it pays off in the end to have someone that you feel at least has your best interests.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And you have to, maybe interview a few different practitioners. You have to just sort of go on the fly sometimes, because as you're, maybe you have this person for a specific, issue, and then you need to add someone else. And then maybe you start healing a bit and decide, okay, well, I've moved away from the endocrinologist now. And, maybe now I need some, like a naturopath on my team or something like that. So it really is about learning what's out there. And then so you have to do a lot of research on your own too. And then just being very open and very conscientious about who you are putting on your team, because ultimately at the end of the day, they can go home from their office, and if they've made a mistake or given you a bad prescription or anything else, it's like they go home and you have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's really important. But, that's one piece of the non-toxic lifestyle. Definitely, like, it's actually really fun to go through your house and like get rid of all the chemicals and junk that, you just don't need. And it's like crazy how scented and strong and everything, these cleaners and even personal care products. It's wild to think of all the chemicals that are in there. And for women, it's a really big deal because we're using a lot of products in many cases.
Yes, we are. And I can remember using air freshener years ago, spraying it around the house so things would smell good. Sticking those, remember the ones, I guess they still have them, that you stick in the wall. It's oil to make things smell pretty good. I can remember using Febreze.
Me too.
And I said, oh my God, I was probably poisoning my poor kid.
Right. I mean, it's crazy because here's the deal. It's so true. It's so true. I know. We've all been there. And I used to be like a Bath and Body Works junkie. I had just like every scent. And now I can't even smell it. I'm just like, oh God. But it's, we grew up in many cases with these products. And so it seems like everybody has them. They sell them at every store. And sort of the pervasive thought is if it wasn't safe, they wouldn't sell it.
Oh my God.
But unfortunately, that's just not true. These things.
It is so true.
I know.
So true. And then
they're not tested.
The commercials of the testing and, the spraying. And you're right, that is what we've grown to understand, that that's huge, because we do feel at some level that it is safe, because why would we sell it if it's not safe?
Right. Why would people make that? Why would people buy that for their homes? Like, we just don't think the whole thing through. And it's just not, I mean, so much of it is done for profit. And, one big eye-opening thing for me when I was, starting to clean these things out was you can't just throw them in the garbage. You actually have to take them and dispose of them responsibly.
Really?
Yes, like you can't take all these cleaners and just throw them in the trash. You need to take them usually to, like, your city will have several days throughout the year or whatever, at the town center, usually a dump or some kind of municipal center. They'll have like a day that they collect these things. And so all your, Clorox and your Pine Sol and all these sprays and all this stuff, it has to go there. Like, you're not supposed to throw it in the garbage.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
It is wild.
And
But
this is stuff we're spraying on our kitchen counters, and
yeah.
our babies are crawling on the floor, and our dogs are, licking their paws after walking on this. And if you really start to think about, the amount of all of this stuff. So, think about your daily routine. We wake up in the morning and, we take a shower, and think about all the products you use in the shower. And then you get out and you brush your teeth and you put on your makeup and your deodorant, and you do your hair. I mean, think about how many products that is. And then, on the weekends when you're cleaning, you're, doing the floors and doing the countertops and vacuuming and putting carpet fresher on and spraying the Febreze. I mean, it's just like no end, right? There's scented candles. There's laundry detergent that smells for like 3 months.
Wow.
What is that? What is that?
Wow. And
what are these chemicals?
All the products you just mentioned, this is every day, just
This
about.
is every day.
Oh,
Yes.
Wow.
This is
I never thought
day.
about it like that before.
I know. Many people don't. And, I was right there. I was using the stuff, and I mean, I just didn't know. And once I started doing the research, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And it's really great that now there's so many other options. I mean, for like an all-purpose cleaner, a lot of people will just use like vinegar and water. Like you dilute the vinegar, you can add a little lemon essential oil or something to make it smell nice. There are safer cleaners that you can buy over the counter if you don't want to make your own. So like 7th Generation and brands like this, they make great laundry detergent. There's tons of options now because people know about this.
Yeah, and I use them as well.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love it. And it gets your clothes just as clean. And, it really is amazing what a difference there is now in my sensitivity. Like I notice if somebody's got a lot of fragrance on, and, not just perfume fragrance, which of course is toxic, but the laundry detergents, these dryer sheets, like all of the stuff, if you're smelling that, that's a VOC. Like that's harming you right then.
What's a VOC?
A VOC is a volatile organic compound, and it is these chemicals that are being released. And if we can smell it, that's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And so I notice now I'm so much more sensitive than I used to be. I say that, before I was so bombarded with it, and I was, using it at home, and everybody I knew was using it. And it was like you almost went numb to it.
Right.
Yeah. But it was hurting you, you were having headaches and fatigue and like all these things. And a lot of these things are endocrine disruptors. They're xenoestrogens, and they mess with your hormones and can affect fertility and your hormone cycles and all sorts of things that are pretty nasty.
Yeah, because a lot of the cleaning products, at least many years ago, to me meant cleanliness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Meant that
and
things
that's
were
just
clean.
Not what they are now.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I remember, if it didn't smell like Pine Sol and bleach, like it wasn't clean.
Exactly.
And now I realize that's not the story.
That's how I grew up.
So many of us did. And that's the thing. It's like, the good news is it's really easy to change these things. There's very effective solutions, and there's really, kind of an endless array of DIY projects, to make your own cleaners. We've got some on our blog, some all-purpose and some, glass cleaner and things like that. But it's also so great for simplification because you don't need 27 different cleaners under the kitchen sink. You maybe need 1 or 2 and to do your whole house.
Yes, I use much less now. I mean, I use, I may have 1 for everything, an organic cleaner for everything, a safe cleaner for mostly everything except glass. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. And even some of the vinegar sprays do really well on glass.
Yes.
It just depends. It just depends. But it's amazing how quickly you can switch over. And, with personal care products, there are a lot of, choices there with natural deodorants and toothpastes and even makeup. There's great new organic makeups everywhere you look, and there's a really great quick way to kind of figure out what's going on with products that you have. If you look up on the Skin Deep database, I think it's cosmeticsdatabase.com or .org. It's put on by the Environmental Working Group, and you can actually look up your product. So like for me, I was wearing a certain mascara several years ago and I happened to put it in there and it was a 10. It will rate things like 0 to 10. And that's sort of the toxicity scale. And it'll tell you why it gets that rating and what every ingredient is in there that they know about. Some aren't disclosed because of proprietary reasons, and which is kind of scary. But this was a 10. And I was putting this on every day next to my eyes. And do you know, I was able to find another, mascara that was equally as great, gave me the same look, and it was a 2.
Wow.
And that is a massive difference when you look at using that every day of your life and on top of 10, 12, 13, whatever other products.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot. And just hearing you name all the products that we use in our homes, all the products that we use from the time we wake up to the time we leave for work in the morning or start our day, there are a lot of products that we use every day. That's a lot.
Yeah. And think about lawn care. Think about things that we bring into our house, furnishings that are treated with, flame retardants and other chemicals. I mean, stain stuff that we put on our carpet and walk around on. I mean, it's really crazy. And so I try not to go, into stress mode because people hear, they're like, oh my God, it's everywhere. I have to live in a bubble. And it's like, no, we're in the real world. Like we can do a lot of really easy stuff to reduce our exposure while still, being able to wear deodorant and being able to wear makeup and having a beautiful home,
Right.
But that's clean and safe.
Right. I actually saw I'm always watching documentaries or in some news segment of something. And this fireman said that homes burn much quicker today because of all the flame, I guess all the fabrics, a lot of the fabrics are not flame retardant. They're not averse to flame. So homes tend to burn quicker because of all the chemicals in the upholstered furniture. I just thought that was interesting.
It's amazing. They're full of chemicals. And it's something that it's kind of a process and it takes some researching. And again, not to go to total stress mode, but it's like really, especially if you're very health compromised or if you are going to be building a new house or doing something, it's really worth a good amount of research to figure out what are the safest things that I can do? What are the easy swaps? For a lot of people, if they're going to be getting a new mattress, that's really something to consider because those are treated with a lot of chemicals and you're going to be really close to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Every
breathing
night.
it in every night. Yeah. And you need that restorative sleep. You don't need your immune system in overdrive while you're trying to heal and recuperate. So,
right.
Yeah, there's a lot of great things now. And like I said, the movement's so big that these options really do exist. And they actually are quite affordable. In many cases, some of these items are actually less expensive than traditional counterparts, especially with the cleaning products and things like that. I mean, when you're talking about vinegar water versus, 27 different bottles of things, I mean, you can see there's a definite cost savings and a space savings.
I feel I spend less on products now. Yeah. It's gotten to be really simple. The products, I don't need as much as I thought I did at one time.
Yeah. And I used to have all different kinds of makeup for every kinds of different look and this and that. And it's like, as I sort of, not necessarily for toxicity reasons, but just as I simplified my life and there's definitely a simplification that comes along with eating real food and taking care of your body and getting the toxins out. And the next element we'll talk about is moving in nature. But as you start to like connect with, the movement, the nature, like getting outside, fresh air, like you just sort of like start naturally simplifying. I can't explain it, but it happens to everybody I've seen go through this. They decide, I don't need all this noise. I don't want all this clutter. I don't need all this stuff, and it's really amazing how that sort of transforms.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, it takes so many worries off your plate. And I think so much of it has to do with the fact that living this way, you feel a lot more calm. You feel a lot more resilient to stress. Your mood is improved. And so I feel like maybe you can tackle those things a little easier, and you can also want to create a calmer space because you're now calm. Whereas before, it was all this like insult to your body, this noise, this stuff, these chemicals, and you kind of are like frenzied, and you don't even really notice it. I know I didn't notice it before.
It sounds like you grow to have an appreciation for what's outside, what's in nature. That's very great. That's really great.
Isn't that something?
It
I mean,
is.
when
It
you,
really is.
when you can get out in nature, like there's so many studies that have been done on how nature and viewing nature, even looking at a picture of nature, can reduce our stress levels so much. And of course, we know about the benefits of fresh air, sunshine. I know so many people grew up with the vilification of sunshine and, oh, we've got to slather ourselves in this toxic sunscreen and go outside and, we can't get the sun.
Or me not go out in the sun at all.
Right.
If I could avoid it.
Yeah. And it's like, oh man, look at everything we missed, all that connection. And I absolutely do not advocate for going out in the sun for 8 hours a day unprotected in a bathing suit. Like that's not responsible at all. But, we do need unprotected, without the sunscreen, sun exposure for our immune system. We need that to produce our vitamin D. It's so important. The vitamin D epidemic is just unreal. So many people are affected with this.
Yeah.
And, these sunscreens are really toxic. They are really, really toxic. They cause a lot of problems in and of themselves. And if you go to just pink or just enough that your skin would be pink, it's like, that's your kind of like, okay, I've gotten my sun. I'm good to go. It's usually about 10 to 20 minutes. Darker skin tones need a little bit more, 20, 25 minutes. And then you're good. If you're going to be out longer, there are, ways to protect yourself under, hats, umbrellas, using clothing, or there are some natural sunscreens that are good barriers for if you're going to go have a beach day or be out on a boat or whatever, and you need the protection. But just for our day-to-day life, there's really not a need to slather ourselves in sunscreen every morning before we head out the door to commute to work or whatever we're going to do. That small exposure is not going to be damaging, is not going to lead to skin cancer. It's really the severe burns that lead to skin cancer. And there's a lot that we can do in our diet. People that have a lot of lycopene, like through, tomato paste and tomatoes in general, but really cooked tomatoes are higher in lycopene. And having that in your diet, it's almost like internal sunscreen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your body's a lot more resilient to sun exposure than it would be, if you're eating a bunch of junk food. So, movement in nature, again, the fourth element really has to do with, getting that fresh air, the sunshine, grounding to the earth, walking barefoot on the grass, feeling the energy of the earth, spending time in nature, and of course, getting proper movement. And what's great is you can kind of marry the two. You can go out for a walk or a hike and get your movement outside. And movement really is so beneficial, obviously, for us in every form. But when it has a purpose, if you're out gardening or you have a task for the movement, that seems to be more beneficial. Research has been done to show that, movement with a purpose actually is more beneficial for us than just going out and like doing a bunch of jumping jacks or whatever.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with planting a garden.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah.
It's an idea because I tell myself that I'm going to do that and it never happens.
Well,
it's a fantasy in my head. Maybe one day I'll get to it.
There you go. There you go. It is rewarding. It is a lot. It can be a lot of work. We had a farm, when we lived in the suburbs, we, kind of started doing some gardening, and then we actually ended up moving to the middle of the woods in New England and started an organic farm and had over 200 animals and a big, vegetable garden and herb plot and all of this. So we really got into it.
Wow.
We did that for about 3 years, and it was amazing. I mean, it was a lot of work, but it was so rewarding and amazing. And there's just nothing like, growing your own vegetables and raising your own food. And it's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but there's easy ways to get started, just even having a pot of fresh herbs in your kitchen window or something is awesome. And you would be amazed how much that adds to meals. And I mean, I know you cook with so many great fresh fruits and vegetables and all of that. And so those fresh herbs, like, just add so much.
Wow, that is so neat.
It's great. Yeah, I love it. And our fifth element is thoughts and emotions. This has to do with eliminating negative thoughts, emotional patterns, balancing out our stress, really looking for creativity and purpose in our life. And it also has to do with addressing the energy system of the body. So there's kind of a lot of things under that umbrella. But overall, this is where we deal with kind of those belief systems, thought patterns, positive thinking, reducing our stress load, really having purpose in our lives. And I don't mean, that, oh, this is my calling and this is my purpose. Like, that's great.
Okay.
But just even being of service, just having purpose in what you're doing, taking a meal to a friend, like anything like that, inspiring creativity, like cooking that meal, doing some artwork, right now coloring in adult coloring books is all the rage. Like anything like that is creative, that allows us to like switch out of that left brain work and go into that right brain creative, really important for our health and our stress levels.
I'm still not too sure about the coloring book, but I'm hearing people like it.
Yeah, people do. I haven't done it yet either. I do some watercolor and I really enjoy doing watercolor. I do abstract watercolor cards and I like hand paint those for friends and family for different occasions. And, it's really fun. It's meditative. You sort of get lost in it. And I don't start with any grand, oh, I'm going to be this famous artist or, this has to really look like a tree or whatever. That's why I do abstract, hint, because it's just colors and it's just shapes and it doesn't have to look like a duck.
I like what you said, that it's meditative. It's calming. So it's that in itself is worth
cute.
the coloring in the art.
Yeah, you get to play a little bit. You color and put colors together and it's like, oh, I feel inspired. I'm going to do all blues and all these ranges of blues, and then let's have a splash of orange in there or something. And it's really, I didn't ever consider myself a crafty person, or whatever, but I have really enjoyed it. And I've heard great things from clients that are doing similar things with the coloring books or what, just having fun. So, and then our last element is connections. And obviously that has to do with fostering our social relationships. That has to do with our spiritual side. And it also has to do with being a conscious consumer or having a conscious cultural mindset. So really being a good, person in the world, like showing up for the world. And this can be, as nice as, just saying hello to people on the street, opening doors for people. This could be, sending thank you notes. This could be making a meal for somebody in need. This could be buying fair trade, items that that people were paid a fair wage for their work. Like there's so many ways to integrate this into our life. And it doesn't have to be this big assignment of, oh, this is another thing on my to-do list. It's just something that kind of fits in to your day. It's just that extra little mindfulness. And that's really the key, is the mindfulness.
And just showing just a little gratitude every day, a little kindness every day.
A little kindness, like it goes a long way. And, not only is that beneficial for the person that you're showing it to, but it's so beneficial for you. You really can feel a difference, a spring in your step when you're saying hello to everybody on the street, or, you don't want to walk around like a crazy person in New York, like talking to every single person, but just a head nod. And, I try to really make an effort that when I'm at a store and I'm checking out or whatever, I stop for a minute and I make eye contact with the person that's checking me out. And I say, hi, how are you today? And I genuinely wait for their answer before continuing on with something else, or if I'm at the deli counter and I need something or whatever, rather than just walking in and going, I need blah, blah, blah. I stop and say, hi, how are you? And
That's
we just
awesome.
have a moment, it's a moment. I find that those things, again, like I said, it's just part of a mindfulness. It's just part of a practice, and it doesn't take a lot from you. And, am I going to say that there aren't times that I forget or that I'm in a bad mood or whatever? But that is one of the best ways to shift yourself
It
out of a
is.
bad mood.
It
Yeah.
really is or if you're having a bad day, things don't seem to be going well. Sometimes, like you just said, it's great to just go speak to somebody. Just
Mhm.
go and have a conversation.
Right. And you
I
just
like that
don't
idea.
know how you're going to impact that person. You just don't know.
Or how they'll impact you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true. And I have met some really neat people like that. And it's not necessarily like we're fast friends and we know each other now. It's just I've had some really enlightening, cool conversations with people that, normally like whatever, why would I talk to you? You're just sitting next to me at the counter in a restaurant, or you're just it's like it's so easy for me to just get on the phone or just do whatever. But if I make that little bitty effort to, just make an offhanded comment like, can you pass me the salt? Or isn't that a pretty flower? Or, oh, that looks lovely what you're eating. Anything to just kind of open that door. It's amazing how you can connect with people.
And I think it's wonderful that you actually find people to talk to, because everybody's so distracted these days. I know everybody isn't, but it
Hmm.
seems like,
It does. It
with
does
the
seem.
phone or something. So to find somebody to make eye contact with, that's fantastic.
It's true. It's amazing. And you kind of, I do notice that like at a store or something, the people that work there are really kind of taken aback sometimes. They're like, oh, wait, like you just asked me a question that wasn't about what you needed. You asked me how I'm doing. You said hello to me. Like they are kind of like, whoa, what was that? And, it takes a minute sometimes, but I just hold the gaze. I just look right at their eyes and I hold the gaze for a minute. Hi, how are you? And just wait. And, if their name's on their name tag, when I leave, have a great day, Diane, like whatever, because it does so much for them, but it does so much for you.
That is so awesome.
It's all part of health. It's all about the holistic thing. And, so many people would go, what does saying hello to somebody have to do with your health? What does, switching out my toothpaste really have to do with my headaches or whatever? It's all a holistic thing. And like you talked about before, going to different doctors for your feet and your head and your stomach and your this and your that. It's also compartmentalized. And so much of our life is compartmentalized. So if we can just look at the whole picture, we are whole beings, we are all connected, we are part of this planet, like we're sort of all here together. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about it, but it really is important to show up in that way and to view life as kind of a whole system. And it really can take you from sick and alone and isolated and miserable to thriving and being connected and being healthy and being resilient.
And it sounds like these essential elements are a way to get people thinking about a whole body approach, or a
That's
whole
it.
body, mind, spirit approach, actually.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it seems like.
That's really it. Because again, like I said in the beginning, it was like, how do I explain this to each and every person I work with and come in contact with in our online community, our blog readers, our podcast listeners? How do I explain this? And so this concept really came about like, okay, here it is. It's the concept of the elements and it's all in there. And, I've thought and thought and thought and really tried to look at anything else that could be put in there. It's like, yeah, that pretty much covers it. That's pretty much all of it. That's what I got to say, And so it was like, okay, this works. And it's really easy for people to conceptualize. They're like, okay, I get it. Like it's tangible in some way. It's not just esoteric information.
And if people want to learn more about these essential elements, are they on your website? Or
They are on our website. Yes,
Okay.
realfoodwholehealth.com. And then we have our flagship class will be released later this spring. And it is going over the elements and really like getting into the nitty gritty with people. How can they do this in their life? What are the food lists? What are the, how do they do this? And how do they do this in a busy life? And, doing the analysis with them and the assessments and all of that kind of deep stuff that covers all of that.
Well, Amy, I really want to thank you for providing us with tips to help improve health. It's always great to have people come on and tell us how we can improve. I want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I want to really, really appreciate the work that you do and the mission that you're on to help people live healthier and better lives.
Thank you, Amy. And I feel the same way about the work you're doing. And if anyone's interested in learning more about Amy, her information will be in the show notes, as well as her website and information about the 6 essential elements for health. I want to thank you for listening.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please, feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.